Jess and welcome to day 14 of our 30-day Learn to Sew challenge. And today we are going to start our very first project in this series. This is a great project for beginners and it's a free pattern available on our blog. A fun set of coasters will complete any party, table setting, or bar cart. Mix and match the colors to coordinate with your home decor and the changing seasons, or even match your favorite team's colors. This scrap-friendly project makes a great gift for coworkers, teachers, college students, friends, and family. This is a great project for beginners because it practices cutting out fabrics, layering fabrics, straight stitching, and using some handy notions. If you don't have a sewing machine and you still want to make this project, you can simply cut out the pieces and hot glue them together instead of stitching. I'm sure you're eager to get started, so let's begin. For this project, you'll need 2 colors of cork fabric, faux leather, or any other non-woven fabric that doesn't fray. I recommend choosing a light and a dark, or a print and a solid, because you'll want the tiles to contrast. You'll also need a cutting mat, a ruler, a rotary cutter, some basting spray, or you can use basting tape, and scissors are always handy to have, and also some sewing clips if you would like to just help hold everything together, but they're not completely necessary if you don't have those yet. If you're sewing this project, you will need your sewing machine and a spool of polyester thread. It's also super helpful to use a Teflon foot when sewing with cork fabric or faux leather. If you're not sewing this project, you'll also need a hot glue gun and some glue. So let's start with the main fabric, which will be your darkest fabric. So I'm gonna set these aside. I'm just using some scraps for this project. And the materials for this project will make a set of 4 coasters. First, start by cutting out the back pieces, which measure 4 inches wide by 4 inches high. I'm only going to cut out enough squares for 1 coaster just to show you how the assembly goes. So next, out of the same fabric, which is your main fabric, you're going to cut 13 3/4 inch squares. So I'm just going to align the 3/4 inch marks on my ruler along the straight edge of my fabric. And for tips on how to cut out your fabrics, I definitely recommend watching my video a part of this series, which was day 13 of 30 on this Learn to Sew challenge. I share lots of cutting tips and recommendations. So it's helpful to use the lines on your cutting mat to measure and make sure things are straight, but then also using the ruler. A combination of the ruler and the mat guidelines. This is great practice for cutting straight lines. And since this project takes minimal fabric, if you make a mistake, you can just cut an extra piece. So you can set aside the main fabric pieces. And next we're going to cut 12 3/4 inch squares from our contrast fabric. So this will be your lighter fabric or your solid fabric. Now we're going to position the small squares on each of the back pieces. So with cork fabric and faux leather, you cannot use pins through the fabric. So that's when adhesives such as basting spray and basting tape will come in handy. I'm going to spray the wrong side of one back piece so it's sticky. And you'll definitely want to spray this away from your machine or even outside because some of the sprays have a strong odor. Also, you don't want to get anything sticky that's not supposed to be sticky. If you're using the basting tape, you can just take a few pieces and adhere it to the back side. So this is a double-sided 1/4 inch wide basting tape. And just continue adding some pieces and just smooth down the paper to make sure it has a tight bond to your fabric. And then you can just peel off the paper. And if you're struggling with getting the paper off of the other side of the tape, you can take a pin and score the paper across the tape, and then you can just fold it back, and then you can peel it off that way. So it's a little bit easier to get that started versus on just trying to peel the very end of it. So I'm going to start with the one that I sprayed, and you're going to take one of your main fabric tiles And with the wrong sides together, you're going to position it in the upper left corner and make sure the side and that top edge is aligned, and you can just lightly press down to adhere it in place. Then you'll continue positioning the tiles until you have 5 rows of alternating tiles. You'll notice that there's a bit of extra backing fabric on the right side and along the bottom, and that will allow for a bit of wiggle room when positioning the tiles, and don't worry, we'll trim off the excess later. If you have some sewing clips, feel free to clip some around the outer edges to help hold the outer tiles in place. Now let's begin sewing. I've already wound a bobbin and threaded my machine, and I recommend setting up your machine for a 2.5mm straight stitch length. Also, attach your Teflon foot to your machine if you have one, and be sure to watch the other videos in this series if you have questions about how to set up your machine. So take your coaster, and you're gonna start in the upper right-hand corner with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So that way from the raw edge of that corner tile to the needle is an 1/8 inch. And on my foot, there is a small little guideline that I'm gonna line up the edge of the fabric with. So find yourself a visual guide so that way you can maintain your 1/8 inch seam allowance. So start by sewing forward 3 stitches, and then we'll sew backward 3 stitches. Just gonna remove a clip so we have a little bit more room, and you're gonna sew down the side of the coaster. And stop about 1 stitch away from the bottom edge of that upper right tile. You're gonna raise the presser foot, pivot the coaster, lower the presser foot back down. Notice that the needle stayed in the fabric, so that way my fabric didn't move. And then you'll sew all the way down the lower edge of this first row of tiles. And when you're about 1 stitch away from the outer edge, you'll raise the presser foot. And I'm gonna go 1 more stitch because when I pivot, I notice I'm too far over. So I'm gonna do 1 more small stitch. Now I'll pivot. So 2 stitches down. And I might have went a little bit far, so either 1 or 2 stitches, and you can always double check to see if you need to go more or less. And now you're gonna sew along the upper edge of the next row of tiles. And you'll continue the same process, sewing down the side, across, and weaving back and forth with 1 continuous line of stitching. So now you can pivot and stitch up the other side and across the top edge to finish off your stitch lines. And now that we've reached where we began, we're going to back stitch 3 stitches and sew forward 3 stitches to reinforce the end of our stitch line. Now raise the needle to the highest point. So there's a button on my machine so that I can click that and it'll automatically move the needle. Otherwise, you can turn the hand wheel towards you. Then raise the presser foot, bring your threads out, and trim the threads so they're flush with your fabrics. So back at the work table, there's just 1 more step, and it's to trim up all of the edges. So some of your tiles may have shifted as you sewed or weren't cut quite square, and that's okay because now we will trim it up so it's all even. So the top edge will likely be your most even edge. So I'm going to line up a line on my ruler along that top edge, and make sure you don't cut into your stitches, and I'm just going to shave off this excess to straighten it up. Now that this edge is straight, I'm going to turn the coaster, align my ruler along that straight edge, and trim up the bottom. Again, just be really careful that you don't cut into your stitches. So you'll repeat this same process to create more coasters and finish up your complete set. Great job completing this project. I hope this easy tutorial gave you a little bit of practice and the confidence to move on to another project. In tomorrow's video, I'll be sharing another free pattern, which will coordinate with the coasters that we just made. If you decided to sew along today, we'd love to see your completed project and also your progress during this series. Share photos using hashtag SallieTomato and hashtag DIY Checkerboard Coasters and hashtag 30-Day Sewing Challenge. There are 5 more projects left in this series, and I hope you'll stick around because each project is meant to continue to build your confidence and your skills for sewing. If you like this project, let us know. Give this video a thumbs up and comment below and let us know what you thought. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that way you get notified when the next video releases. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.